Alright, cowpokes. Now, before I say anything, I need you to understand one thing. I love Arthur Morgan. I love him like he's family. I have cried over this man. I've grieved over this man in a way that I've not grieved over real people in my life, except maybe my dad. And you know, that says a lot about me personally, but I'm not going to talk about that. What I am here to talk about is the cold, hard, unavoidable truth that Arthur Morgan, the big, lovable, gruff, artist cowboy with a heart of gold and tuberculosis, is objectively, demonstrably, factually one of the dumbest protagonists in the history of video games. And before the Red Dead community closes this tab and rides off into the sunset on their horse, hear me out. I'm not saying that Arthur Morgan is a bad person, but I am saying that the man made choices. A lot of choices. Choices that if you sit down and think about them for longer than 30 seconds, make absolutely no sense at all. And the funniest, most heartbreaking part of that whole thing is that Arthur Morgan, despite everything, is one of the most beloved characters in gaming history. The man is dumb and iconic at the same time. And that is a rare talent, guys. That is, for real, a rare combination that most video game characters could only dream of. I have 1,500 hours in this game. You can trust me, I know what I'm talking about.
God damn it, Dutch. I got tuberculosis.
Anyway, reason one. The man gave himself TB.
Well. I mean, what the heck?
Arthur? I cannot stress this enough. The single dumbest thing that Arthur Morgan does in the entire game, and it happens in the first act before Arthur even has a chance to prove himself. Let me set the scene for you guys. Leopold Strauss, the gang's resident loan shark, a man who's frankly one of the most immediately dislikable people in the camp, and that is saying something when Micah Bell is standing right there, asks Arthur to go collect a debt. Not a robbery, not to plan a heist. No, sir, just go collect a debt from a sick farmer, from a man named Thomas Downs, who is obviously deathly ill. The man is coughing like a broken engine. He's pale, can barely stand up. His wife is looking at Arthur with this expression that very clearly says, "Please, sir, this man is dying. We cannot do this today." And what does Arthur do? Arthur, our big, strong, genius cowboy, grabs Thomas Downs and gets coughed on directly in his face. Right in the face. Fantastic. And the game, in its infinite dark wisdom, shows you that moment with full dramatic weight, so you know exactly what just happened. You know, Arthur does not know yet, but you knew, if you knew the cough that could rough up a guy who's tough. Dang, that was fire. Anyway, so if you're playing for the first time, you probably thought, well, that seems bad, or you probably didn't expect anything and just kind of moved on, because, I mean, what else can you do? The game doesn't let you back out. This is canon. Just smile through the pain, cowpokes, as Arthur's gonna grab Thomas Downs, and Thomas Downs is going to cough on him. That is as inevitable as Thanos. But there is one thing that absolutely, completely destroys me when I think about it. Arthur didn't have to be there. Strauss asked him, Arthur said yes. Arthur, who could say no to basically anybody in Dutch's camp, except, Dutch himself, and even then, the genius said yes to going and terrorizing a sick farmer for money that the gang, frankly, could have done without. An IQ too low, I guess. And the payment for that little errand, for doing Strauss a favor, for being a nice guy about it, is tuberculosis. The most important, most plot-relevant illness in the whole game. The thing that defines Arthur's entire second half of the story, the thing that makes the ending hit the way that it does. All of this starts because Arthur went to collect a debt that wasn't even his business and got coughed on. The fandom has been talking about this since 2018, guys. The Red Dead community will never let this go. And they shouldn't let it go, to be fair, because it's the defining Arthur Morgan moment. You want to know who Arthur Morgan is? He's the guy who voluntarily put himself in the path of a dying farmer's cough for a loan shark's side hustle. That is Arthur. That's our boy. Nice. And so another brutal part is that when Arthur eventually confronts Strauss about the loans later in the game, after he's found out about his tuberculosis, he throws Strauss out of the camp. He kicks him out. He does the right thing. Eventually. Too little, too late, obviously, because, that cough already happened, the TB's already in his lungs, and the clock's already ticking, but he does do it. This tells you Arthur Morgan always had the instinct to do the right thing. He just needed several months and a terminal diagnosis to get there. The man isn't evil, guys, honestly. He's just spectacularly, historically, cosmically slow on the uptake. I mean, the fight with Tommy at the start of the game left Tommy mentally damaged. Maybe Arthur was whacked too hard in the head as well. That would explain a lot. And yeah, Thomas Downs is the same guy who stopped that fight. By the way, subscribe to the channel. I've got tons of videos like these planned in the future, and I'm sure that you don't want to miss them.
Reason number 2.
He trusted Dutch for an unreasonable amount of time.
Now, I want to be fair here, because Dutch van der Linde is genuinely one of the most charismatic and compelling characters in the whole game.
And the argument for why Arthur kept trusting Dutch for as long as he did isn't a stupid one. Arthur, though, is the stupid one. We know that Dutch is the man who took Arthur in as a child. Dutch is the man who gave Arthur a purpose and a family when he had neither. Dutch is, for most of Arthur's life, the closest thing to a father figure he has ever had. I understand why Arthur trusts Dutch. I understand it emotionally, psychologically, and narratively. But guys, come on! There comes a point in every relationship where you have to look at what the other person is doing and say, you know what, this isn't working anymore, and I gotta walk away. That point for Dutch comes approximately at the Blackwater disaster that kicks off the entire game before you even see the opening credits. The gang is already on the run, thanks to Dutch, who's already made a catastrophic decision that got people killed, got the Pinkertons on their trail, and got them stranded in the snow up in the mountains. That is the starting line. Before Arthur does anything in the game, Dutch has already done all of that. Yeah, personally, I would say peace and ride out into the sunset at that point, honestly. But, what does Arthur do? Arthur follows Dutch into the snow, and then follows Dutch down from the mountains, and then follows Dutch into the Horseshoe Overlook, and then follows Dutch through increasingly unhinged plan after increasingly unhinged plan, watching the whole time. Watching Dutch spin further and further away from the man Arthur grew up following, watching Dutch make worse and worse decisions with more confidence, and watching Dutch start trusting Micah over everyone else, watching Dutch start talking about one big score more and more desperately, like a man who started to believe his own lies because the truth is too painful to look at directly. And Arthur can see it, guys. That's the devastatingly dumb part. Arthur's not oblivious. He's not stupid about Dutch the way he's stupid about, say, going to collect debts for a loan shark. Arthur can see what is happening to Dutch. You can see it in the journal. You can see it in the conversations Arthur has with Hosea, with Charles, with John. Arthur knows. He says at multiple points in the game that he feels like Dutch doesn't care about them anymore the way that he used to. He says it out loud, and then goes and follows Dutch anyway. Every single time. Nice. The Red Dead fans have produced what I can only describe as an extraordinary volume of analysis about this relationship. I mean, the essays. So many video essays. The Reddit threads that go on for hundreds of comments. The Tumblr posts that make people cry at 2 in the morning. I promise that's not a self-report. The fandom has described Arthur's relationship with Dutch from every possible angle, and the conclusion they keep arriving to is the same one. Arthur stayed too long because leaving Dutch felt like losing the only father he ever had. And that's heartbreaking. I agree that it is surely heartbreaking, but it's also, and I say this with love, really freaking dumb. Because Arthur had options, cowpokes. He had a horse, quite a few guns, money, skills, and multiple people who would have gone with him if he said the word. John told him to leave. Charles showed by example that you could walk away when things got bad. Hosea, the great con man himself, was against the vengeful and overly ambitious Dutch and tried to warn Arthur, but Arthur stayed. Over and over again, Arthur stayed. Right up until the very end, Arthur was still trying to get John and his family out while also trying to deal with Dutch, because even at the end, with everything collapsing, he couldn't fully commit to just being done with the whole thing. If that isn't dumb, well, I don't know what is. Now, don't lasso and hog tie me here, as this isn't a criticism of Arthur as a person. It's just me observing that the man's loyalty was set to a level that most functioning adults would consider unreasonable. Arthur's loyalty dial goes from 0 to 1,000 with no stops in between. You're either someone he'll die for or you're nobody to him. And Dutch was always at the very top of that dial, even when Dutch stopped deserving to be there. And that, if nothing else, is the central argument to why Arthur Morgan is dumb. He's dumb in the way that people who love the wrong person too much are dumb, which is to say that he's dumb in the most human and relatable and utterly tragic way possible. Blind loyalty. It's a scary thing. So, reason 3. He went to Guarma. Cowpokes, if you played Red Dead Redemption 2, you know what Guarma is. If you haven't played it, well, Guarma's what happens when Dutch has a plan. I mean, Dutch always has a plan, and the plan this time was to rob the Lemoyne National Bank in St. Denis, because, as Dutch explained with full confident valiant energy, it would be the last job, the one big score, and after this, they were going to Tahiti. They were going to be farmers, mango farmers to be precise, and everything was going to be fine. Arthur went along with this plan. Everyone went along with this plan like puppets, and the bank robbery went exactly as badly as anyone paying attention should have expected it to go, which is to say, catastrophically, with Hosea, my man, dying, and Lenny, my boy, too, got killed. But Arthur and a chunk of the gang ended up on a boat that sank, and they ended up on a Caribbean island called Guarma, which is not in Kansas, or anywhere near where they were supposed to end up. They got on the wrong boat, guys. Dutch van der Linde, the great visionary leader of the Van der Linde gang, master planner and legendary outlaw, got on the wrong boat during an escape from a bank robbery gone wrong, and took his best guys with him. And Arthur Morgan, the man that had watched Dutch's plans get worse and worse for months, got on that boat. He didn't see a boat and think, actually, I'm gonna get my horse and ride the other way like a sensible person. Or, I should stay back with the women and others like Jack or Uncle. Bro got on the boat without a second thought. He ended up in Guarma and then had to fight his way through an entire Caribbean revolution just to get home, which, let me remind you, he was trying to do because he has tuberculosis. He has limited time, he's coughing constantly, and spent a chunk of that limited time in Guarma, fighting soldiers on a sugar plantation because Dutch got on the wrong boat. Now, the Red Dead fandom, as a whole, has a complicated relationship with the Guarma chapter. Most fans, if you go to the subreddits and check the Reddit threads, and if you look at any community discussion about Chapter 5, will tell you that Guarma is the weakest part of the game. It's short, it has no fast travel, your gear is stripped from you, the island looks beautiful, but the gameplay is limited, and the whole thing feels disconnected from the main story in a way that the rest of the game doesn't. I mean, the fandom isn't wrong about this, guys. Guarma is the part where even the people defending the game get a little silent too, because, well, there's not much to defend. But here is what I want to focus on, which is not the design of Guarma, but the fact that Arthur even went there to begin with. Arthur went to Guarma because he helped plan the bank robbery. Arthur was involved in the bank robbery because Dutch told him it was the last one. Arthur believed it was the last one because Arthur had been believing it was the last one for his entire adult life, and never once stopped to consider that perhaps Dutch was never actually gonna stop. And the whole Tahiti plan was the kind of dream that people use to keep themselves going, rather than a real thing that's never actually gonna happen. Tahiti, cowpokes, mango farming in Tahiti, that was the plan, right? And Arthur, a man who has spent 30-something years robbing and running, nodded along to that plan like it made complete and total sense. He questioned Dutch, okay, sure, but did nothing about it, because it was Dutch saying it. And because Arthur Morgan, for all his beautiful journal writing and artistic sensitivity, was at the end of the day the kind of man who would follow Dutch van der Linde onto the wrong boat and end up in some kind of cooked, war-ridden island before he would sit down and seriously interrogate whether the plan made any sense at all. Reason 4, Micah Bell. Just Micah Bell. Micah Bell, also known as the Rat. And I think that the entire Red Dead fandom would agree with me on this. One of the most immediately, aggressively, obviously untrustworthy characters ever put in a video game. The man walks into camp and every single instinct you have as a player says, do not trust this person. You cannot like this person at all. Do not let this person near anything important. Micah Bell is the kind of repulsive person who, if you saw him in real life, you'd cross the street to avoid, and then cross back to the original side because you didn't like the way he looked at you from across the road. Or, you just knock him out as soon as he started speaking. There's really no in between. Arthur Morgan, boy genius, can see this, and he doesn't like Micah. Arthur says at multiple points that he doesn't trust Micah. He says it in his journal, he says it in conversations. The dislike and distrust between Arthur and Micah is one of the most consistent and clearly communicated character dynamics in the whole game. Arthur knows Micah is bad news. He's always known it. The game never tries to hide that Arthur knows it. And yet, guys, Arthur did not do anything about it. Not really. For most of the game, he grumbled, he glared, he had arguments, he told Dutch occasionally that Micah was a problem. But the decisive action that the situation called for, the moment where Arthur should have just said, you know what, Micah, this ends now. Stay in the strawberry jail, buddy boy. And he should have handled that way, I think, before Micah could do any more damage. But nah, boy genius doesn't do anything, not until it was too late. Not until Micah had already made his deal with the Pinkertons, not until Dutch had already sided with Micah over everyone else, not until the whole gang was already falling apart beyond saving. Almost half the gang was dead at that point, too. And there are two things that come to mind when I think about this situation. The first is that Arthur had a chance at the very end of the game, when it's just him and Micah on that mountain, to finish what should have been finished a long time ago. And in the high horror version of the ending, he does get to stand up to the rat one last time before things go the way they go. That is the game giving Arthur his moment, and it hits so dang hard. But the second thing I think about is that the fans, particularly the people who love going through the game slowly and reading everything carefully, have documented multiple moments throughout the story where Arthur could have seen the signs that Micah was the rat. There are letters, there are conversations, there are moments that, in hindsight, spell it out clearly. And Arthur, for all of his perceptiveness about Dutch, did not put those pieces together fast enough. Now, Micah Bell has, somehow, become one of the most discussed video game villains in recent memory. Micah is discussed the way you discuss a splinter, with a focused, burning, specific hatred that the fandom nurses with a devotion that is almost impressive. The man is hated. Truly, completely, universally hated. Every corner of the Red Dead community agrees on Micah Bell being the worst. And the worst part is that the only reason Micah was able to cause as much damage as he did is that Arthur didn't deal with him sooner. I'm not saying Arthur should have handled Micah violently. I am saying, though, Arthur, with everything he knew and suspected about Micah, should have done something sooner. Anything sooner. He had the instincts, he just didn't act on them until it was too late, which is a pattern for Arthur Morgan that we're gonna keep coming back to because it's basically his whole thing. Guess what? That's dumb in my books.
So thanks, John, for getting his hide.
Reason 5. He kept smoking with tuberculosis.
Now, this is a short one, cowpokes, but I do need to say it.
We know Arthur Morgan had tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is a disease that primarily and most critically attacks the lungs.
The lungs, ladies and gentlemen.
The things you need to breathe. The things you need to, and I cannot stress this enough, not cough blood out of. Arthur had tuberculosis and his lungs were failing, and his body was slowly shutting down, and the clock was ticking on his life with every passing mission. Arthur Morgan smokes cigars and cigarettes. The whole game. He can smoke the whole game, and he does. You as the player can pick them up and smoke them because they give you Deadeye bonuses, and the game doesn't stop you from doing this after Arthur gets his diagnosis. And Arthur doesn't stop himself from doing this either because, well, Arthur is Arthur, and Arthur does not always make great decisions. Now does he? Now, I know that the science of tobacco and tuberculosis interaction was not exactly common knowledge in 1899 the same way it is today. I'm not saying that Arthur was medically negligent in the modern sense. I am saying that Arthur knew his lungs were sick. The man knew. He was coughing constantly. He could barely climb a hill without stopping to cough some blood up. You know, nothing too serious. I mean, he knew something was profoundly wrong with his respiratory system, and he kept smoking. Because he's Arthur Morgan and he has one mode, which is to keep doing whatever he was doing before, regardless of what new information has arrived. This is also a thing the fandom finds very funny and very sad at the same time, which is kind of Arthur Morgan's whole deal. Funny and sad simultaneously. The man is a walking contradiction of competent and catastrophically unwise decisions, and the smoking while dying of a lung disease is just a perfect encapsulation of who he is. He's not doing it to be dramatic, cool, or tough. He's not doing it to make a point. He's doing it for the love of the game, I guess. And yeah, but a stupid game of Russian roulette with his life. Reason 6. The Journal. Now, I am a fan of the Journal, so here's where it gets a bit more affectionate, because we need to talk about Arthur Morgan's journal, which is simultaneously one of the best things in Red Dead Redemption 2, and one of the most inexplicable things about Arthur Morgan as a person. Arthur Morgan keeps a journal. We know this, a detailed, extensively illustrated, thoughtfully written journal. He draws the animals he encounters with genuine skill. He sketches the landscape he rides through with the eye of a person who notices the beauty in things. He writes about the people he meets, sometimes with surprising insight and warmth, sometimes with the bluntness of a man who doesn't have time for nonsense. He writes about Dutch with a mixture of loyalty and growing doubt that would make a psychology student very excited. He writes about John and his family with the gruff affection of someone who would never say any of this out loud, but needs somewhere to put it. Arthur Morgan, the outlaw, the enforcer, the man who beats people for money and robs trains, has a bounty on his head in multiple states, is secretly a sensitive artistic soul who processes his experiences through journaling and wildlife illustration. That is Arthur Morgan. That is who the man is, and I love him for it. But, and there's always a but, here's the dumb part. Not the journal itself. I mean, the journal is great. The journal is one of the most beloved features in the whole game. The fandom adores the journal, as do I. People post pictures of their favorite journal entries all the time. The art especially gets shared constantly because it's actually impressive. And the way Arthur writes about many things is charming and funny and sometimes fairly devastating. The dumb part is that Arthur, who clearly has the capacity for reflection and the ability to think carefully about his life and choices, apparently could only do that thinking inside the journal. The things he wrote down, the doubts about Dutch, the growing unease about the direction the gang was going, the awareness that things weren't right, those things stayed on the page. They didn't make it to actual decisions made in actual situations. Arthur wrote about his doubts and then went and did that doubtful thing anyway, which is a level of journaling productivity that I personally relate to deeply, but that is nevertheless extremely counterproductive. Also, just a small extra dumb little icing on this cake of stupidity. Arthur is an outlaw on the run, isn't he? I mean, he's being hunted by Pinkerton agents. He has a bounty on his head, he's a wanted criminal, and he's carrying around a detailed personal diary that describes his crimes, his feelings, his associates, and his locations in handwriting that is distinctly his. If the Pinkertons had found that journal, guys, if Agent Milton had gotten a hold of that one book, the Vanderlyn gang would have been done and dusted like Colm O'Driscoll. Arthur Morgan, master criminal, was riding around with a self-incriminating personal diary in his saddlebag. That is a level of operational security that would make any actual outlaw want to cry. Now, I keep repeating myself, but fans love this journal. I love this journal, but come on, let's be honest about what it is, which is a genius feature that also simply reveals that Arthur Morgan is the kind of man who would document his own crimes in illustrated detail, and then keep the documentation on his person at all times. That is our boy genius. Though I bet you never thought about it this way, did you? Reason 7. Tahiti. Alright, we already talked about Guarma, but we have to properly talk about Tahiti. And Tahiti deserves its own dumb moment because Tahiti is not just a failed plan. Tahiti, as we know it, is a symbol. It's the thing that Arthur Morgan kept in his back pocket as a comfort whenever the reality of his life got way too heavy to carry. And the fact that he kept carrying it for as long as he did is, in my opinion, the thing that most clearly illustrates how Arthur's brain worked. I mean, Dutch talked about Tahiti all the time, or not always Tahiti specifically, but some version of Tahiti. Someplace where they would all go eventually, where it would all be worth it, where the big score would be cashed in, and all the running would stop and everyone would be just fine. Some distant good future where everything worked out. Dutch was very good at painting that future. It was genuinely one of his greatest skills. He could make you see it, make you want it. And Arthur wanted it. Now, Arthur was not naive. I want to be clear about that. Arthur was not a man who could be fooled easily about most things. He was perceptive. He was experienced. He had seen enough of the world to know how it worked and how people worked and how things went wrong. He was not easily conned. And yet Dutch, for decades, kept Arthur coming back to this idea of the future, this place over the horizon where everything would be fine. And Arthur kept buying into it despite every piece of available evidence saying that it was never going to happen. The Tahiti meme in the Red Dead fandom is enormous, cowpokes, as it should be. The "I'm going to Tahiti" joke is everywhere. When things go wrong in the game, when Dutch comes up with another catastrophic plan, when the situation gets worse instead of better, someone in the community will drop a Tahiti reference and the whole thread dissolves into people laughing and grieving at the same time. Because that is what Tahiti is now. A joke about how Dutch kept selling a dream that was never real, and how Arthur, brilliant, stubborn, loyal, tragic Arthur, kept on buying it. And the truly painful layer under all of that comedy is that Arthur honestly knew. I think he knew that Tahiti wasn't real. He wrote about it in the journal, as I said before. He had conversations where you could see him wanting to believe and yet not quite managing it. He held on to Tahiti not because he thought it was actually going to happen, but because letting go of it meant accepting that life he had chosen was what it was, and was never going to be anything better. And that was too much to accept, so Tahiti stayed on the shelf, a beautiful, useless, comfortable lie, right up until Arthur didn't have enough time left for comfortable lies to be worth keeping. And that is sad. That is real sad. But it's also, and I stick to this position, a little bit dumb, because Arthur was smart enough to know better and chose not to know better because it was easier. And choosing not to know something when you could know it and it would help you is my definition of dumb. Arthur Morgan, dumb by choice, tragic by circumstance, beloved by all of us regardless. Reason 8, the most helpful outlaw ever. Now, here is the thing that I think does not get talked about enough in the Arthur Morgan is dumb conversation, which is the side missions, the stranger missions, the random encounters, the endless, inexhaustible supply of people in the world of Red Dead Redemption 2 who needed something done, and Arthur Morgan was somehow always available to do it. Arthur Morgan is on paper a criminal, a serious criminal, a man with a long history of robbery and violence in the service of one of the most notorious outlaw gangs in the American West. He is not, as far as anyone outside the gang is concerned, someone you would want to make eye contact with, let alone ask for help. And yet the world of Red Dead Redemption 2 is populated with an extraordinarily number of people who approach Arthur Morgan and explain their problems to him, and Arthur, time and time again, helps them. He helps a woman escape another gang being cruel to her, also known as Sadie Adler. He helps various people with their relationship problems. He helps a guy get out of an alligator-infested swamp. He tracks down missing family members. He assists with medical emergencies, participates in schemes that make no sense to him, but which goes along with anyway because somebody asked. And he does a lot of things without significant payment, especially on high honor playthroughs, because Arthur, in high honor mode, is operating less like a dangerous outlaw and more like a roving frontier social worker who occasionally has to shoot people. The fandom absolutely adores this about Arthur. I mean, well, so do I. And it is fairly right to adore it, because it's one of the most charming things in the game. Watching this huge, gruff, coughing outlaw carefully help someone with their problems. clearly uncomfortable with being needed in this way, and also clearly unable to walk away, is just wonderful. It's one of the best things Red Dead Redemption 2 does, making the world feel alive through these interactions, and making Arthur feel like a real person rather than just a game character. But you forget one thing, cowpokes. Arthur is on the run. Arthur has Pinkertons chasing him. Arthur has tuberculosis. Arthur has a gang that is falling apart around him, a leader who's losing his mind, and a traitor somewhere in the camp. Micah. Arthur doesn't have time to help everyone. Arthur should, by any rational accounting of his situation, be spending every available moment either trying to find a way out of his situation or, at a minimum, resting to preserve the lung capacity he has left. Instead, Arthur's out there helping strangers. Every time, without fail, because he cannot say no. Under all the toughness and rough and tough exterior and criminal history, Arthur Morgan is the guy who can't walk past someone in trouble without stopping to help, and that is beautiful. And it is also completely, spectacularly dumb. I mean, given his circumstances, a man with a terminal illness and a bounty on his head is out here being the most reliable, helpful person in the entire state of New Hanover, and he will not stop doing it until the very end. You want to know the true Red Dead 2 experience? It's a man who's dying, who's being hunted, who knows his gang is compromised, deciding that what this moment really needs is for him to help someone find their lost dog or escort a drunk man home safely. That is Red Dead Redemption 2. Justifies the name for sure. And that is who Arthur Morgan is. Dumb, kind, and wonderful. Reason 9. Marry Linton. Now we're getting to the stuff that cuts deep, cowpokes. The Arthur Morgan and Mary storyline. For those who need context, Mary Linton, nee Gillis, is Arthur's former love. They were together before the game, things ended badly for reasons that the game slowly reveals, and during the story, there are missions where Arthur and Mary interact again, and where it becomes very clear that there are still feelings there on both sides. Mary needs Arthur's help with her family, her brother's caught up with a cult, and her father's also causing problems in his own way. And Arthur helps. Of course, Arthur helps, because this is Arthur Morgan, and he's the most helpful murderer alive, isn't he? So, during these interactions, Mary and Arthur have conversations that are some of the most emotionally pinching scenes in the whole game. They're two people who clearly still mean something to each other, and who are also clearly both aware that the circumstances of Arthur's life make any real future together complicated. Mary at one point asks Arthur to leave. She asked if it was too late for them and for Arthur to run away with her. There's a chance for real redemption here for him. Pun intended. Honestly, and Arthur doesn't take it. He stays, goes back to the gang, he goes back to Dutch, Micah, and that whole mess. And Mary sits on the tram, rides off, and Arthur watches her go. And you're sitting there as the player wanting to shake him through the screen. Now, I understand why Arthur doesn't leave. The same reasons he doesn't leave Dutch apply here. The gang is his family. He can't abandon them. He feels responsible for them. And also, I think Arthur didn't believe deep down that he deserved the kind of life that leaving with Mary would have represented. The journal makes this pretty clear. The way Arthur talks about himself and his choices. He doesn't see himself as someone who gets the good ending. He sees himself as someone who keeps going until he can't anymore. I mean, okay, he might not be dumb, but he's very emotionally intelligent and, yeah, cruel. I miss him. So, from the outside, from the perspective of watching a man make choices, Arthur had a chance to walk away from the thing that was going to get him killed. And he didn't take it. And then that thing got him killed. By then, Mary was long gone. That's the brutal gist of it. And I am gonna say that it was dumb, not because Arthur's reasons were not understandable, but because the result was that he died. And he absolutely did not have to. There was an alternative, and he chose not to take it. And if that's not the definition of a dumb decision, then, well, I don't know what is. The fans who have played through the Arthur and Mary questline come back to it constantly, guys. The fandom treats it with a specific kind of grief that's different from how they treat the main ending. Because Mary represents the road not taken. She represents what Arthur's life could have looked like if he had been capable of choosing himself over his stupid sense of blind obligation. And Arthur, our boy genius, just couldn't do it. He was too stuck between who he had been all his life, and so that'll be his reckoning. Blind trust, duty, and sacrifice of love or a better life. And that's both the most human thing about him, and also the decision that costs him everything. So, Recent 10. He trusted the man who took John's son. So, Angelo Bronte is the mob boss of St. Denis. He's Italian, he's theatrical, he's clearly operating on a different level of danger than most of the people in the Vanderlyn gang had dealt with before arriving in the city. He is also, and this should have been immediately apparent to anyone paying attention, not a person who was going to deal with Dutch in good faith for any longer than it was useful to him. Dutch decided that the way to get a foothold in St. Denis was to build a relationship with Bronte, to make a deal, to play the political gang, or the long game, so to speak. And Boy Genius went along with this, because that is what Arthur does as always. And because the alternative was pointing out to Dutch that the plan was not great, and Arthur had already done that multiple times about other things at this point, and that had not helped, so maybe this time Dutch was right. Maybe it would work out. Maybe Bronte was the key to everything Dutch said he was. As most Dutch plans go, it did not work out. Bronte set them up. The whole thing with the St. Denis trolley station, the robbery that Dutch organized based on Bronte's information went badly, and then Dutch, in response to being set up by Bronte, decided that the solution was to throw Bronte to the alligators. Yep. This is actually one of the more dramatic acts of consequence enforcement in the game, but it also meant that any political upper hand that they had in St. Denis was now completely gone, and that they made a very powerful enemy out of the organization that Bronte had been running. Arthur went along with all of this. The trusting of Bronte, the robbery based on Bronte's tip, and the aftermath of the Bronte situation. He went along with it because, well, Dutch had a plan, and Arthur trusted Dutch's plans even when he did not trust Dutch's plans, which is a sentence that should not make sense but somehow perfectly describes how Arthur operated. The Bronte arc is one of those parts of the game where you can clearly see that Dutch was already pretty far gone by this point, and that Arthur could see it too, but was still trying to believe that the man was just going through a rough patch. Wow. Well, it was not a rough patch. Dutch was gone, or rather, the version of Dutch that Arthur had believed in for 40 plus years was gone. And Arthur kept trying to deal with the version that was still there, which was a mistake. A big, expensive mistake that cost multiple people their lives. Reason 11, the daily disasters. Okay, so I've talked about the big, dramatic, narrative dumbness. Let me tell you cowpokes about the small stuff. The everyday Arthur Morgan dumbness that the fans have been cataloging with absolute glee since the game came out. Arthur Morgan falls off his horse. A lot. This man has presumably been riding horses his entire life. He's an outlaw who lives on horseback. The horse is his main mode of transport in every situation. And Arthur Morgan, veteran horseman, experienced rider, will absolutely clip a fence or a rock or a small tree branch and go flying off of his horse in the most undignified way possible. The physics engine makes sure of this. Arthur goes off that horse and hits the ground with the full weight of a large man who really should have been paying more attention. And then he gets up and looks around like he's hoping just nobody saw that. The fans of the game have collected footage of Arthur falling off horses since 2018, and they still find it funny. I do too, because it's Arthur Morgan, man. He's supposed to be this capable and intimidating presence, just absolutely eating dirt in front of everyone. It never gets old. Arthur also gets kicked by horses. His own horses. Animals that he's bonded with, that he has cared for, that he has given names to, whom he's brushed and fed treats to, will absolutely kick the ever-living heck out of Arthur. The game is very realistic about horses' behavior, and horses do not give a dang about your feelings or how many times you have brushed them. They kick hard. And Arthur gets kicked too. Maybe that's why he's a bit slow. Maybe I'm just rage baiting at this point. There's also the fact that Arthur, when not being a competent outlaw, has the physical awareness of someone who has never been in their own body before. He bumps into things, gets stuck on furniture, he clips through doorways at the wrong angle and has to back up and try again. He's a big man in a world full of small spaces, and he handles it the way a very large dog handles being in a house with more enthusiasm than grace. And yeah, he falls a lot. Reason 12, the full picture of the debt collection side of things. A bit of a mouthful, but we talked about Thomas Downs and tuberculosis, but I want to zoom out for a second look at the debt collection work Arthur did for Strauss more broadly, because it's not just one visit that is the problem. It's the whole operation, honestly. Strauss was lending money to people who could not afford to pay it back. This is not charity or a service, my dear cowpokes, this is a trap. And the job Arthur was being asked to do, the enforcer role, the guy who shows up when people cannot pay, this was not something Arthur was ever comfortable with. But he did it because Strauss was part of the gang, and the gang needed money. And this is one of the ways that the gang made money. He did it because saying no to things the gang needed, or honestly, Dutch needed, was hard for Arthur. He did it and was not happy about it, and it's all over the journal in the way Arthur writes about the people he had to go after. Then he got TB doing it, he kicked Strauss out of camp, and after that, he felt bad about having done the debt collection at all. Arthur went through the whole arc on this one, participating in something he was uncomfortable with, suffering consequences for it, eventually doing the right thing and stopping it, feeling guilty about the time between starting and stopping. That is a very Arthur Morgan type of thing to do, cowpokes. He does the wrong thing, he knows it's wrong, he keeps doing it because circumstances make stopping feel impossible, something terrible happens, and then he stops and feels bad. That is almost a character formula for him. And if you look at it that way, the tuberculosis is almost fitting in a dark narrative karma sense, because it's the most dramatic possible consequence for the most dramatic possible choice. Of course, Arthur Morgan got tuberculosis while collecting a debt for a loan shark. Of course, that is how it was supposed to happen. No other protagonist in gaming history would get tuberculosis in this specific way. Only Arthur. Reason 13. Arthur cannot swim. I gotta talk about this before I end the video. No matter what you guys say, Arthur Morgan can't swim. He can ride a horse, he can shoot with either hand, he can hunt elk, skin bears, lasso men from horseback at full gallop, make art in his journal like he's a Da Vinci, and survive jumping off a cliff with Dutch van der Linde. He can do all of those things. Arthur Morgan cannot, though, under any circumstances, survive being in deep water. If Arthur falls into a river deep enough to reach his shoulders, he drowns, after floating for like a minute. Not after a heroic attempt to fight the current, he drowns very quickly. The kind of immediate urgency that suggests the man has never, not once in his entire adult life, attempted to swim. I mean, he can, but he's so bad at it that it makes me want to get a mod for better and longer swimming in RDR2. And yeah, this is the man who lives in a world full of rivers and lakes and bayous. The gang camps near water constantly. Water is everywhere in the game, and he jokes about John not being able to swim. Wow, Arthur Morgan, the legendary outlaw, the man Dutch called his best man, approaches every body of water deeper than his chest like a champ, but he flails around for like 30 seconds max, I think, and he drowns. Bro's stamina is so bad, he's like a chain smoker. Oh wait, no, hold on a minute. And here's the layer that makes it even funnier. You can teach Arthur to do so many different things in this game. You can improve his stamina, his deadeye, and his health. You can make him better at virtually everything through progression. But you cannot teach him to swim better. Even with a max stamina level, that is a hard cap. Arthur Morgan's ceiling for aquatic capability is standing in shallow water and floating, at best. And look, Arthur, buddy, I understand. I know that swimming in the 1890s was not a universal skill as it is now. I know that not everyone who lived in 1899 could swim. That is historically fair, but Arthur Morgan, a man who has survived everything the world has thrown at him and kept going, meets his match in a lake that a moderately athletic 10-year-old could cross. That is a comedy that never gets old. The man is dumb enough to wander into deep water and then immediately dumb enough to be surprised when it goes badly. Every single time. So yeah, that is the case of Arthur Morgan being dumb. I hope you guys liked the video. Don't come after me for making this video. It's not meant to be taken seriously, cowpokes. I will go and drink some coffee in my RDR2. I'll go drink some coffee in my RDR2 cup now. And also read all of your suggestions and stuff in the comments. So I'll see you guys in the next video.